Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. Now, today we have a very special guest, and his name is Steve Mack. He has an extensive background in the medical field, including being a traveling nurse, working in the ER, a board-certified nurse, and I'm missing something. Am I? Mental health.
Yeah, mental
That's
health, and
one
I'm a
of them.
board-certified nurse coach.
Board certified nurse coach. That's what it was. Thank you. You've got quite a background.
It's been interesting.
It sure sounds like it. What got you into the medical field in the first place?
Well, that's kind of a fun story. I never wanted to work in healthcare.
Oh, really? What
No.
happened?
So I've had more careers than cats have lives. And before I came to healthcare, I was a home improvement contractor.
Mm-hmm.
I sold that business in 2008. There was
Okay.
a bunch of millionaires in Washington, D.C. that needed some more millions. And it's okay if the whole rest of the economy got screwed and people lost their homes and businesses and whatever, because they needed more millions. But I'm no longer bothered by that. That's good news. So I sold my business in 2008 and was going to go to college to get a degree in business and go back into business doing something. And instead, I came out as a paramedic. Yeah, so it was a hard right turn. So I came out as a paramedic, and so I was a paramedic for first as an EMT and then became a paramedic. And so I did that for a few years and then went to nursing school. And I was about 10 or 11 months old as a nurse when I started traveling. And that was long before COVID made it popular. And I traveled all through that, and then came to my local hospital in January of last year. Left there earlier this summer to pursue creating my own practice, and I'm going to still do some travel nursing.
Wow, that's very interesting. Like I said, that is quite a background whenever it comes to the medical field. A lot of people tend to just kind of pick a path and just run with it in the medical field, right? Sounds like you just took that hard right turn and wound up in medical field and not just a particular building in medical field land,
Yeah. So the reason I went to EMS is I didn't know anything about. I had employed paramedics, like I had become an EMS customer a couple of times, and so it's thanks to some of those guys working hard that I still walk today. But the reason that I went to EMS is really because I was looking for the schedule. In the area where I lived at that time, a lot of guys worked 2 24-hour shifts, and that told me that I'd have 5 other days during the week available to do other things, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't work that way, but and then I ended up moving as a paramedic. But that introduced me to the concept of healthcare as a career. Prior to that, I had discounted healthcare as a career, and I have no interest. Right, my wife was already a nurse, but I didn't really think of that as a career, especially not a career for me. Yeah. So, but now I'm just in healthcare all the time. I'm in and out of hospitals all the time, and so on. And so I've met a lot of nurses doing lots of different kinds of nursing. But I really went to nursing school to be a PA. That was the objective for me, because nursing school pays more than being a paramedic. And so I was going to use the more money from nursing school to pay for PA school to be a physician's assistant.
Oh, okay.
And because I missed the autonomy that I had as a contractor. Right? So when I came into EMS was really the first time I'd had a real job. Prior to that, I'd never had what one might consider a real job. Everything else had really been kind of independent. Even if I worked for somebody else, I'd really been independent. Except in the military, which is different. I was in the Navy,
Mhm.
and they will let you work overtime in the Navy, but you won't have to worry about being paid extra. So they take care of that for you. It's the same low rate no matter how many hours you work.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah, it was well worth it.
That's good to hear.
So mental health. Let's
Mhm.
see, retrieving sanity. Where to start? I had probably lots of us can trace mental health challenges to either some big event, or else for the most of us, we could probably trace it to childhood, right?
Mhm.
Something that just didn't go well. And so
Yeah.
I'm one of those.
Mhm.
So a lot of things in my childhood that I didn't enjoy. I didn't like being pushed downstairs or hit with a belt buckle or being choked or things like that.
Mhm.
When I got, I'm a Christian, but I got inoculated against all things Christianity. Like if you think about getting a flu shot, so it's that time of year where flu shots will be
Mhm.
popular, and those other injections. um, so that's how an inoculation works, right? You get enough of the live
Mhm.
virus that if you your body happens to get the real one, you're just like, oh, I've seen that before. I know what to do. And so
Mhm.
I got inoculated against all things Christianity as a kid. So I was
Mhm.
raised in church, or even when I was in foster settings, I had to go to church with whoever I happened to be living with at that time. And so I
Mhm.
got lots of different exposure to um, like all different ways to think about and talk about Christianity. And
Mhm.
in a disconnect at home, where I'd hear some of those songs being screamed instead of sung.
Mhm.
So Amazing Grace being screamed while cupboards are being slammed and pots are being thrown and stuff like that. Well, that was a disconnect for me. Like that didn't line up.
Right.
Um, what I caught out of that, it's not what was taught, but what I
Mhm.
caught out of that is that I am bad. Um,
Mhm.
and God is always angry at me. Um, so I was abused and then neglected, or abused and then rejected by my mother,
Mhm.
and just neglected by my father. Um, we have a better relationship today than we do have. There is restoration available. We have a much better
Mhm.
relationship today than we used to have. But
That's
so that
good.
started it, right? And
Mhm.
then all through my high school years, I was in some flavor of foster placement. Um, Sometimes with people that I'd not met before, sometimes with family members, but all over the place. I went to 5 different high
Mhm.
schools in 2 different states. Uh, so I've always been the outsider. I've never felt like I'm a part of this. Certainly, I've never felt like I'm a part of this family.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I joined the military, and then I got out of that and started. Well, I was an armed guard in Seattle too for a little while. That was a really dumb job.
Mhm.
That was not wise. Plus, it didn't pay well. It was very dangerous. Anyway,
Oh man.
everybody lived through that. Uh,
That's good.
Older, wiser Steve would tell younger, dumber Steve not to do some of the things that I did do then. That led to some altercations that I didn't have to have, but those are different kinds of
Mhm.
stories. Um, at any rate, I've never had a real relationship. Like at this time, right? I've never had a real relationship.
Mhm.
And I also don't talk, even this idea, right? I'm talking to you, some guy that I don't know, and however many people listen to you that I also don't know. So that's all new for me.
Mhm.
So from doing that other kind of military and the armed guard thing and other stuff, I became an over-the-road truck driver. I picked that job for
Mhm.
the isolation,
Mhm.
and then realized I was in solitary confinement.
Mm.
So I put myself there.
Ouch. Mhm.
Um, the real reason that I didn't want to get to know you is because if you got to know me, you wouldn't like
Mhm.
me anymore.
Yeah.
So it's going to seem like we have a good relationship, until you start to get to know me, and then
Mm-hmm.
you are going to reject me like everyone else has done,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't
Yep.
want to have that anymore. And so
Yeah.
I picked a job that was solitary, that had a lot of isolation, truck driving.
Mm-hmm.
I had an uncle who was a truck driver, and I idolized him, and so I did the thing that he did. I never really thought about what the lifestyle meant, but the deal for me was solitary confinement, because I just lived in my truck and I just ran. Like I just stayed moving, right?
Yeah.
The first time that I was suicidal was in 1997. I was 24 then, and had I've seen, so going back to the Bible, there's a bunch of verses. Would you believe there's a bunch of verses in the Bible that says, "Don't do this, that's sin. Don't do this, that's sin." Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I treated every one of those verses like they're a wet paint sign. What do you do with a wet paint sign? Touch it and see if it's still wet.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I treated every one of those verses like a wet paint sign. And what that did for me is cement the idea that sin isn't a thing that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like your kid might do something wrong and then he come back and say, well, like, sorry, Dad, right? Please forgive me, and then let's fix it and go on. So it's not a thing. Sin's not a thing that I do. It's who I am as a person.
Yeah.
I just am bad, right? So in 1997, I was in Connecticut, and I was sitting in the back of my semi thinking about that. I'd just been out touching the wet paint sign, and decided, there's a verse right in Romans that says the wages of sin is death. I decided to go get paid.
No.
I can't stop what I'm doing, right? Nobody at that time, we didn't really talk about anxiety, depression, like all that kind of stuff like we do now, right? We talk about anxiety and depression the same way we talk about where do you want to go for lunch today. It's just that common. But at the time, we didn't. And if anybody did, I didn't hear it because I'm alone in my own little world in my truck, right?
Yeah.
So, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go get paid. The wages of sin is death, and I'm just going to go get paid. I got interrupted so I've spent my healthcare career asking people, do you hear voices that other people don't hear? And I have heard voices that other people wouldn't hear. And so, anyway, I got interrupted, and then read a book. Instead, like, the question was, are you still going to read that book? Like, well, I'm busy right now.
Yeah.
Like, well, my thought is that if you read the book first, if you still want to finish what you're doing, you can. And if you don't want to, but if you do this first, you won't be able to read the book. And that logic worked for me. So I read the book. The book was Robert Schuller, Self-Love. So I read that. I read parts of that. And then I'm still not convinced, right? I'm still going to carry on with what I'm doing. But I got a call. My dispatcher called me. And so a radio type thing that we used at the time in the truck. So I got a message that said I had to go and pick up a load. And that gave me purpose. I don't have any value. I don't have any identity. Well, I do have an identity. My identity is I am bad. I am a bad person.
Yeah.
Right? And so this whole journey from what it's gonna be is relationship, identity, value, purpose, responsibility. That's going to come up here in a bit. And again, I didn't have that language at that time. But so when I got that message from my dispatcher, I had purpose. Go pick up that load, right? So then suicide became just a task I have to do at some point. Like, you've gotten an email that says you need to do this, you keep pushing it off. Like, oh yeah, I got to get to that, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly how I thought about it. I have to get to that. So that came up lots of times over lots of years. And I'm like maybe millions of other people, right, who've had those ideas. I don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to mention it. Brene Brown talks a lot about masks and shields, how we hide who we are, or I deflect your questions with shields, right?
Yep.
And so I just lived my life doing that. I didn't think of it as lying to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that topic doesn't come up very often.
Mm-hmm.
And if on the off chance it did come up, how are you feeling? Well, I had a variety of ways to talk about how I was feeling that would lead you somewhere else, right? But
Yeah.
most people never talk to me about those things. I'm not a very friendly person. And so like those conversations didn't come up. The last time that I was suicidal was in 2020. And this is where the intersection of mental health and personal growth began for me. By 2020, I'm already a nurse. I became a nurse in 2015, started traveling in 2016. I'm working with people all the time. This is how black and twisted I was. I'm working with people all the time that are complaining about I'm suicidal, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, right? I can relate to them because I understand the way that you feel in the dark places where you never let people go. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I've never told, I learned how to tell parts of my story so that you would know I understand without having to tell the whole thing, right? So I could use parts, I learned how to use parts of my story to create a connection with the person that I'm talking with so that I could serve that person and help them with their thing. But I'm not worth help. You are. However wrecked, whatever thing you've done, you are. Like, we can get you help. That's no problem, right?
Yeah.
I am not worth help. So anyway, in 2020, I'm sitting in a room at a place I'm renting. I left home with that plan. I'm gonna do this assignment. I was a travel nurse. I'm gonna do this assignment, and then I'm on my way home. I brought the gun with me that I was going to use, and on my way home, I'm going through Iowa. Like, the only thing that lives in Iowa really is cornfields, and so I'm going to stop at a cornfield somewhere. I'm going to go for a walk and make a loud noise. That's my plan. So this particular day, this is the intersection of mental health and personal growth for me. So on that day, I'm holding the gun in my hand that I'm going to use. Like, today's not the day. The gun's not loaded. I'm just looking at the gun and thinking about the day a couple weeks from now where I'm going to finally catch up on that task that I haven't done. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about, like, where am I at financially? I worked a bunch of overtime and tried to make the money that I could so I could set my family up as well as possible. And then I'm just, like I say, go for a walk in Iowa, make a loud noise. I've never written a note because I've never wanted to say the things I would need to say for the note to be true.
Yeah.
And so I've never written a note. And at that time, I also had never talked to anybody about the way that I feel.
Yeah.
Ever. Anyway, because what would you think if you found out that I feel the way that I do? Right? And so I never talk about it.
Yep.
So anyway, that same voice kind of comes back to me with the question. So this is a question of value. The question was, I wonder how important you must really be.
Yeah.
It's my experience for all the people that are suicidal. Like in the ER, I get them sometimes fresh off the event, or interrupted during the event, or interrupted right before they were going to make their attempt. Like, I get them in the ER, I get them like on the edge or just past it, right? For every one of them, what gets them there ultimately is I don't have any value.
Yeah.
However you rub the value off, things you did or things you shouldn't have done, things you did that went wrong, things you did that hurt other people, whatever it was, somehow you've rubbed the value off, and you don't, your innate value, you don't have any value anymore.
Yep.
And we've created a society that we just shit can people that don't have value.
Yeah.
right? Just like their 10 cans.
Yep.
And so suicide is much more prevalent now than it used to
Mhm.
be. It's certainly more talked about than it used to
Yes.
be. But it's
Mhm.
become almost a viable option. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Like,
Yeah.
I could go and do this or this or this, or I could just end it. And like, they're all kind of,
Joking, half joking.
yeah. So I see people right on the bitter edge,
Mhm.
and every one of them has gotten, however they got there, every one of them has gotten to a place of, I do not have any value. I am worthless.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm. Yep.
So that's where I am, right? And I get the question, I
Mhm.
wonder how important you must really be. Well, I'm
Uh-huh.
not very important at all. As evidenced
Yeah.
by, this is a thing that nurses say, as evidenced by, like
Mhm.
healthcare, they say that healthcare is driven by evidence-based practice, which is maybe true, but that doesn't explain all the rumor control that actually runs healthcare. Certainly in the way that we interact with each other. But so I don't have I don't have any value really, as evidenced by,
Mhm.
at that time, I don't have a good relationship with my wife. I don't have a good relationship with my kids. I traveled all the
Mhm.
time. I don't really have any friends where I'm traveling to.
Mhm.
The friends I have at home don't call me,
Yeah.
and when I do come home, I'm an interruption because
Yeah.
everybody's got their routine I'm doing, and I pop in for a few days. I'm an interruption to their
Mhm.
routine. I'm not a part of the
Yeah.
thing. I'm an interruption to it.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any value, but I do have this task that's been hanging out for lots of years. And
Mhm.
so I'm just going to get this task done. That's how I thought about it, as dispassionately as that. I wasn't emotional about it.
Mhm.
It's just a task I need to get done.
Yeah.
So how much value do you have? How important are you really? Like, well, not very important. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm looking at it very differently, because it seems like all the different things in your life that could have killed you, none of those things have. And now
Mhm.
you're your own worst enemy.
Mhm.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Like, well, let me ask you a question. How would you react if somebody pointed a gun at you?
Mhm.
Well, that happened to me in the military, and I did react. I expressed my displeasure, we could say, and with the guy holding the gun and I traded places. I got in some trouble for that, but anyway, he learned a valuable lesson and never did that again.
That's good.
So, was when I was asked how would you respond if somebody else pointed a gun at you, I had an example,
Mhm.
and I've been threatened by gang members in inner city Seattle, and I had some history on how would I react. Like, right,
Mhm.
but here you are. And so I was sitting in my room on my bed, holding the gun I was going
Mhm.
to use, and just thinking about the things I need to do so that this task can be successful.
Mhm.
Just super calm. Just like you're thinking about, like, well, I got to go to work tomorrow. I got to be there at 9,
Yeah.
you know, like no more
Mhm.
emotion than that.
Yeah.
And so the little voice guy says, like, that's what makes me think you're your own worst enemy. Because if
Mhm.
somebody else pointed a gun at you, you'd be very angry.
Yeah.
But you're just looking at it as something like checking all the boxes off.
Mhm.
Well, I never thought of it that way. So then the question was, is it possible that you have value that you don't see?
Mhm.
And of course, my answer was no.
Yeah.
No, that's not likely. I didn't ask
Mhm.
if it was likely. I asked, is it possible? Is it possible that you have value that you don't see?
Yeah.
Well, I had to admit, like, well, it's not very likely. I like to argue, so I went with not very likely. So we went round a few times until I finally had to settle down and answer the question. So this topic, actually, I didn't have this language either, but this topic comes in. Do you know John Maxwell, the author?
No of them. Yes.
Okay. So one of his books is the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth.
Mhm.
In that book, Law 3 is the law of the mirror. The
Law of
law
the
of the
mirror.
mirror says that you have to see value in yourself to add value to yourself.
Mm.
And the obverse of that, so this is, I don't know if it'll show up good. So that's, if it shows up. So that's the
Okay.
head side of the coin, right? To see value in
Mhm.
yourself, you have to add value to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, every coin has a tail side too, right? The negative side.
Yeah.
And the negative side says, if you don't see value in yourself, you treat yourself like you don't have any value. That's also true. I didn't have this language at the time. I didn't know about that book, but that's what was happening. I don't think I have any value, and so I'm treating myself like I don't have any value. So that was the question: is it possible that you have value that you don't see? And I had to admit it's not likely, but yeah, okay, fine, it's possible. And so I began to go treasure hunting. So if you went treasure hunting with a metal detector, right? So you're going to go out to the beach, you're going to take a day off work and rent some equipment and go get sunburned and like do all that kind of stuff. You're doing that with the premise, with the belief that there might be precious metal out on the beach, and I'm going to go look for it because that'll be fun to look for, right? Nobody does all that stuff, just goes through all those steps with the idea that there's not anything out there, you know, except maybe sharks walking around that can bite me or whatever, but there's no precious metal. Like, this is utterly stupid. Nobody does all that. The only reason you're going to do that is because if you like have the belief for some reason that there might be precious metal, then you put your belief into action, start doing the stuff that would put you in a position to find that precious metal, right? That's what everybody's doing if they're going metal detecting. The only time I've gone metal detecting is when I tried to find a gun that I had lost in the woods. That's a very different story. That one wasn't about self-harm. That was just, I fell while hunting and lost my handgun. Anyway, so I tried to find it with a metal detector. So that story ends up happy, but so anyway, I had that mindset as I began to look for, do I have any value, right?
Yeah.
So I started with the premise like, okay, I'm just going to mash the I believe button. That's the thing they teach you in the Navy, the I believe button, which is, it's really handy. If we're talking about a topic that you just don't understand, at some point you're told, just mash the I believe button. Just accept it. It's what that means. So, I just mashed the I believe button and like, okay, I'll play along and there might be value. And so I began to look for it. So the positive side, the head side of that law, right? Law 3, the law of the mirror says that you have to see value in yourself in order to add value to yourself.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, fine. I'll pretend I'm grumpy about it. I'm not happy about it. I think this is worthless. And also it's delaying my task I have to do. But like, okay, fine. I'll go with the premise that I might have value. And so I began to add value to myself. I began to learn about personal growth. And do I have any innate God-given value? Like, not affected, my value as a person, not affected by the things that I have done or the things that I should have done and have not, right?
Yeah.
My friend Clint wrote a book called Responding to the Call, Resuscitating the Heart of Man Back to God. And in this book, he describes this journey, which is relationship creates identity. Identity gives value. Value reveals purpose. And purpose establishes responsibility.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
Value, relationship, identity, value, purpose, responsibility. That's the journey. Okay. I started in the middle. I don't have any value. The step before that was because my identity is I'm just all bad. Like, okay, I mean, I'm an American hero, right? Because I was in the Navy. Yay! I'm a healthcare hero at the time. That was the marketing thing, right? I'm a healthcare hero. Yay! No, that's just a thing they said, and then they don't do that anymore. But the truth is that I was just, especially as a travel nurse, I'm just replaceable. I'm just a monkey that takes a spot on the schedule, right?
Yeah.
And nobody invests, if a healthcare professional has value, because we need more people in healthcare, then the healthcare organization would invest in the development of the person. Nobody does that for a travel nurse. If you're going to get any continuing education, you have to go find it and then pay for it. Where a staff nurse, that the hospital pays for that stuff. The travel company doesn't pay for it because you're just replaceable. The hospital doesn't pay for it because you're not theirs. You're just a monkey taking a spot on a schedule. So all those things for me demonstrated for me that, yeah, I really don't have any value. I don't have any value to anybody, not my employer, not the hospital I'm working for, right? Not the patient who one time says, hey, wow, thanks, Steve. You've really done this good thing for me. And the next time yells and complains or punches me or whatever, right? My identity was, I'm bad. So once upon a time, I'm going to tell this story to demonstrate this journey, right? Relationship, identity, value, purpose, responsibility. Once upon a time, my wife and I adopted a worthless child. We bought a worthless kid. And that sounds harsh, but he was worthless because he doesn't have any value to me. In fact, the first time I saw his picture, the first time I saw him at all was just a picture on a computer screen. And my wife and I were just casually talking about, would you want to adopt somebody? Would you want to adopt a kid, right? I wasn't very committed to it. My wife really wanted to. I was like, yeah, whatever. Sure, fine. So that's the first time I saw his picture. At the time, he's worthless to me. And I'm unknown to him. He's in a different state, right? So, and then we went and got him. We have him in foster care. Now we have a relationship, right? And at first, his identity was my foster kid, which is still kind of like I was a foster kid through all my teenage years. So I was sensitive to that. I wanted him to have a better experience than some of the ones that I had. But, and then we went to the courthouse and we were given, our relationship changed and became legal. Right? We eventually adopted him. We went to see a guy that wears a bathrobe to work and has a little bitty hammer. And so we went to see that guy, and then we had a new relationship. Right? Guy drops his little hammer on the desk and says, from now on, you're his father. From now on, you're his son. So we had a new relationship and a new identity. He was my son. Like the law says, right? That relationship, then identity, that identity gave him value. He has value to me because he's my son. Right? And then because he's my son, I'm like, hey, I got some ideas, stuff I think you can do. Some of those were take the dog out. Some of those were clean your room, right? Some of those were take the trash out. And some of them were other ideas. And then when I had purpose for him, he also had responsibility. That's that journey. Broken down to real life. It's tangible for everybody. Right? Same way, like if you went to work, right? You go and get a job at your local gas station or whatever it is you do. Well, you start a new relationship with them, and that identity is I'm their employee. And you're supposed to have value. A lot of us aren't engaged at work because work treats us as if we don't have any value, which leads to we're not engaged because our identity is insecure. That's that journey. So I began to think about that stuff differently. Like in 2020, we'd already adopted our son, and so I already had that relationship and all that. I didn't have that language. Relationship through responsibility. I didn't have that language. I found that in my friend Clint's book. But so 2020 was the last time that I had a plan for suicide and began to intentionally, this is law number 1 in that book. So I'd live in the 15 laws of growth. Because it's this book. Because law 3 is the reason I'm alive today. So I'm kind of committed to it. But law 1 is the law of intentionality. Growth doesn't just happen. It has to be intentional. right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to grow a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, well, you're not going to like just fall out of bed accidentally and then like, yay, I got a big podcast. Things are great, right? That has to be intentional. Okay.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of, and if yours is going to grow, whether you're aware of them or not, you'll be following these 15 laws of growth, whether you're aware of them or not, right?
Fair enough.
And when you become aware of them, you'll be like, oh, I was doing that. Oh, that's why that worked, right? So anyway, I stopped traveling. I go to my local hospital and get a job in the mental health unit. Ever since I started EMS, mental health patients, I dislike the term psych patient. I dislike that really strongly. But ever since I first came into healthcare, mental health patients have been my favorite flavor of patient.
Oh, yeah.
It's maybe because I can relate to them good.
Yeah.
Even if I never told anybody about it. I can relate to people with broken bones too. I've broken both of my legs. I did them independently. I don't recommend it. It wasn't as much fun as it sounds. But
no.
So I can relate to somebody who's like, my leg really hurts, and I think it's because the bone is sticking out of the side of it, right? I can relate to that. So I find it easy to relate to mental health patients too. I approach dealing with them differently, like outside of the mainstream, like, oh, you have anxiety? Well, we're going to prescribe you this medication, and then you have to start seeing this therapist, and like you're going to do this kind of therapy and whatever.
Yeah.
Not to say that those things don't have value. I think for a lot of people, they really do have value. I have chosen not to go that way for myself.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I want to give you some tools.
Okay.
I think maybe my story is just like, okay, it's just another one, but I want to give you some tools, things you can actually use.
So your tools are going to be the things that you use to get out of that dark place in your story, right?
Yep. And then metaphors that I developed while I'm working in the mental health unit to help those patients, right? So, let's talk about wheelchairs and crutches.
Okay.
So I've used crutches a lot. I broke both legs, so I've been on crutches several times. And I've had to learn to walk again, and I've had to learn to run again.
Big ones.
Which is important for, let's get mental health fixed, right? So I could have, I'm just going to live with my broken leg because, well, you got to understand, I have a broken leg. I got run over by a bus, and now I have a broken leg, right? I could have just lived with that. I just wasn't willing to.
Yeah.
And so, and I realize that fixing bones is different than fixing the way that we think. But the truth is that we can change the way that we think. We absolutely can. So wheelchairs and crutches. A wheelchair statement, when you're in a wheelchair, all you got to do is lift your feet up off the ground, turn it like, hey, push me, take me down to the end of the hallway. Right? Whoever's driving the wheelchair just pushes you. That person does the work. Right? So we're not going to count my foster mom was in an electric wheelchair. That doesn't count. She has to do the joystick. But for a regular wheelchair, right? You just yell at the person behind you, like, hey, take me down there. Right?
Yeah.
And then they do the work. So a wheelchair statement is, I still have depression because my doctor hasn't put me on the right medicine. That's a wheelchair statement. My feet are off the ground.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting in the chair waiting for somebody else to do the thing.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
A crutches statement, the way that crutches work, when I was on crutches, I still had to do the same thing that you're doing. I still had to go up and down stairs in school. I had to still navigate curbs, like all that stuff, right? It took me longer to do the thing that you were doing. I had to do it differently. I had to adapt the activity to what I'm able to do. Yep. And the reason that I use crutches is because they help me to stand up straight. Because if I didn't have that extra support, I would fall over and hurt myself worse.
Yep.
Right? That's what crutches do.
Yes, sir.
So a crutches statement is, But if I wanted to go down the hallway, I wanted to go up and downstairs, I had to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? I had support.
Yep.
I got crutches on. So I got support, but I have to do the work.
Yeah.
So the crutches statement is, I'm working with my doctor to find the medicine that works best for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little shift in the way we talk.
Yeah.
But you move from
just
being
a
in a
little bit.
wheelchair to using crutches.
Mm-hmm.
You've just made progress, right? It's just a little shift in the way that we talk. I still have depression because my therapist hasn't found the therapy that works best for me.
Mm-hmm.
That works for me. So I still have depression.
Yeah.
Right? Or that's a wheelchair statement. A crutches statement is, I'm working with my therapist to find the therapy that works best for me.
Yeah.
Just
Totally
that little
different.
shift.
Mm-hmm.
Moves from sitting in a wheelchair waiting for somebody else to take me somewhere to, I have power, I have control, I can make things happen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Just that little thing.
Some accountability almost.
Sure. Yeah, especially if you're working with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we probably chatted a little bit about yard work.
Yes.
Did we talk about yard work? We chatted about it? Okay.
Yard
work
is fun.
is fun.
Mention yard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yard work is fun.
Alrighty. Introduce me.
If do you have a house or an apartment?
An apartment, but
Okay.
I've lived in houses. So.
Okay. So when you lived in a house, you had a yard.
Mm-hmm.
Whose responsibility was it to take care of the yard?
Mine.
Yeah, yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
City's not going to come and do it for you. Like, you can get a landscaper. Like, I wish I had enough money to get a landscaper, especially because, like, in relationship. So I have two kids. I have a relationship. It used to be their responsibility to do the yard. They feel like it's not anymore. Like, well, I'm married and I live 2 hours away and I have my own family. I'm not coming up there to cut your grass, right?
Yeah.
So that shifted back to my responsibility. So it's your right. The city will do it. You can contract somebody to do it, but ultimately it's your responsibility, right? So in this metaphor, yard work, your yard is your mind.
Okay.
Okay. And so your mind is your responsibility.
Okay.
So we can't control the birds that fly over the yard.
No.
And we can't control the thoughts that come to us. We can influence the kinds of birds that come. And so we'll talk about that. We can influence, we can attract birds, or we can repel birds' thoughts. So we'll talk about that. But so the yard is your responsibility. My yard's my responsibility. And we can't control the birds that fly over the yard, right?
Yeah.
We can't control, like, I've heard huge numbers of thoughts that people have every day, right? I don't remember the numbers, but like thousands.
Big. Yep.
So we can't control the thoughts that come to us. Some of those thoughts land in our yard. Some of those birds land in our yard, right?
Yeah.
We can control whether or not they stay in our yard. So one of the ways to do that is you just walk out in your yard. Like, a lot of us don't know until we take the time to think about it consciously. Like, well, I guess I am responsible for the things that I think, right? We just go about our day and never really give that conscious thought because we're busy doing whatever it is that we're doing. But so one of the ways to control the birds is just walk out in the yard.
Yeah.
Right?
Scare them off.
And some of the birds, will just leave.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's really easy. Like, that's the first step. So that'd be awareness. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is my yard. I guess I'll go check it out, right? See what's out there. You're in my yard, you need to wear shoes. There's a lot of thistles. But, so some of the birds will fly away just walking out there. And I sent my dog out once, a bunch of geese walking through my yard. I don't know why they weren't flying, but they were just walking around in my yard. So I introduced my dog. I didn't think he would attack them. I also thought they would just fly away right away. I just thought she would run after them and, like, bark a lot, like, hey, I want to play, because she's just a puppy. So it was really loud. I thought it was really funny. But the birds left the yard, right?
Yes, sir.
Some birds though build nests in your yard, build nests in the trees,
Mm-hmm.
and so those are the tangled up thoughts that just get locked in your brain, right?
Okay.
So this thing happened today. We call it triggers. So this trigger happened, and like, boom, I'm off the edge now into this train of thought, right? Just like that.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's one of the nests that's just tangled up thoughts that are in your yard, up in your trees. So this will take real work.
Yeah.
You don't clear this by just walking out in your yard, right?
No.
So this will take real work. So you're going to want gloves for this. That is to say, you're going to want thick skin. So you're going to want gloves for this, and then you'll need other tools. So you probably take a ladder, clippers, a saw, knife, whatever, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, bless you. So
thank you.
You'll take tools up there with you. In a world of changing your thoughts, taking these nests down, the two primary tools are going to be the books that you choose to read and the people you choose to spend time with.
Okay.
And so I used to read a bunch of stuff that arguably was not good for me. And I had thoughts that were like not a surprise to have because that's what I fed my brain. Right? And I used to hang around people that, like, especially when I was in the military and then when I was doing that armed guard stuff, I hung around people who wanted to be rough.
Yeah.
And I have a natural tendency to that. And so I hung around people who were like me, who just are like, if you don't do exactly the thing I tell you to do when I tell you to do it, I'm going to be rough. Right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I saw a guy in inner city Seattle at a place I was supposed to be the guard for, and it was raining just like right in front of him. It wasn't raining anywhere else. It was just raining right in front of him in a little spot. So I started shaking my pepper spray, and I said, "You need to stop doing that." He was peeing on the sidewalk. I'm like, "You need to stop doing that, or I'm going to spray you." So I probably instigated the fight that happened after that. So evidently it was uncomfortable.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so, but of course I'm not wrong, right? I am the one in charge. I have authority, and he didn't follow my direction. That was my logic at the time. That would not be my logic today. Like, this is an example of older, wiser Steve would tell younger, dumber Steve, don't do stuff like that. Like, I got in a fight that went in the ground that I didn't need to get into. Right? But that fit the environment that I was putting myself in. And so I behaved. It doesn't mean that I wasn't wrong. I am the one who made my choices. But still, my choices came from the people I was hanging out with and the kinds of things I was reading. Right?
Yeah.
So, as an example, we can change the kinds of stuff that we read and the people we hang around with. And that will have an impact, like a huge impact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
They say, like the nameless, faceless people that none of us can quote, say that the person that you become 5 years from today is going to be determined by the books that you read and the people you hang around with.
Yep.
Like, that thing's been said for a super long time.
Oh yeah.
And so that has an impact on the way that we think. Those are some tools that you can use to take down those nests that are up in the trees.
Yeah.
When you start doing this, you're going to suck at it because you've never done it before, right? And the birds have been coming there for a long time. They're like, hey, this is my tree. I build a nest here. Like, this is where I come all the time. You have to keep taking that same nest down. You're not going to do it once and it'll just be gone. You got to do it over and over and over again. Did you happen to be bullied as a kid? Okay. All right. Have you had anxiety and depression for yourself?
Oh yeah.
I will help you with that. And the other people that are listening. This is super fun. I'll be the middle school bully or the high school bully.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I got to be on both sides of that. Sometimes I was the bully, and sometimes I'm the one who did it, right? But anyway, so I'll be the bully, and we're gonna be in math class, and we just come out of math class. And I'm gonna jump you.
Okay.
I'm gonna say you're dumb.
No, I'm not.
So right. Well done. It's like we've rehearsed this. Well done. So what we've just done is we've created the Ford and Chevy argument. Right? Which has been going on for maybe millions of years, and no one really still knows which one's the best, except it is Ford. But so we've just created the Ford and Chevy argument, right? I said you're dumb, and you shot back with, no, I'm not. Well, I'm bigger and meaner than you. And so I'm going to keep on going. And the bigger your reaction is, the better I like it. Right? That's how bullies are.
Yeah.
The bigger your reaction is, I'm wanting you to start pulling your hair out and run down the hallway screaming. Like when I can get you to that point, then I win. I want you to react that way because that's how I get power.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. I am your anxious thought. And that's what anxious thoughts do, right?
Yeah.
I'm afraid of having this conversation tonight. So I have anxiety about this conversation tonight. The conversation hasn't happened. I just have this fictional thought that a story I've started to tell myself, and I build it up really big, and you're going to be mean to me and ask me these like weird questions I didn't think about, like all this. I'll just build it super up in my brain, right? That's anxiety. It's just being a bully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we came out of class, and I said, you're dumb. And then
no, I'm not.
If you have, right. So I'm going to, but you're like, that's your opinion. And I can overcome your opinion. Because I'm bigger and meaner, and I have more practice. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I can overcome your opinion. Okay? And there's a bunch of other kids behind me. So we're going to start this back and forth, right? Other kids are going to come, and then they're going to pile on you too. They may not have all by themselves, but since I'm doing it, and now there's something like, hey, I can participate, right? Then you'll hear things like, you're ugly, and you're slow, and you're fat, and like whatever, right? All these different things, right? Those are the overwhelming thoughts. So have you experienced that?
Oh, yeah.
Not just one, there's millions of them, right? And they're all of them want attention. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so I've had that. Like I'll just roll around in bed, not able to sleep because I can't turn my brain off.
Yep.
Right? Okay. So here's how to deal with that. Write down these 3 questions. What is right? What is true?
What is right? What is true?
What is good?
What is good? Okay. Let me see. Yeah, I got a pen and pencil somewhere. All right. What is right? All right. What is right? What was the second one?
What is right? What is true? What is good?
True. What is good? All right. Got it.
So first, you're going to write down this anxious thought. So we're just going to use I am dumb. Make it an I am statement. I am dumb.
All right.
But when you're doing this for yourself, use your anxious thought, like the thing that causes you problems. Use that and write it down just as raw and ugly as it is.
Okay.
Let it be raw. Let it be ugly. And what you're doing is you're defining it.
Okay.
So I want to come and buy your car, right? And so you and I are going to agree on what model your car is, what year it is, like all that kind of stuff, how many miles it is, right? All that kind of color, how much rust, like all this kind of thing, right? And one of the reasons is I'm going to get to your house and find out you have a car lot. There's lots of cars there, but this description tells me the specific car that I'm looking for. Right? So we're going to deal with a specific thought. And you can make the rest of your thoughts wait in line. What state do you live in?
Texas.
Okay. You guys probably have it figured out for the DMV. The DMV in your state probably has it figured out. But in Minnesota, the Minnesota DMV, that's where I live, they are masters of wait your turn.
Oh no.
There could be
Oh
one
no.
person in the whole building, and there's 4
Mhm.
DMV people there because, like, they couldn't remember whose turn it was to call in sick because they wanted a day off. And so there's 4 people lined up able to work. There's one person that needs service and one
Mhm.
person at the desk. They're going to wait.
Mhm.
They're going to make you wait until they're ready. They are
Mhm.
masters at it. Probably in your state they do it way better, but here they're like expert at one at a time.
Oh boy.
And if you have kids, if you have more than one kid, then you've experienced this. Or if you've
Mhm.
been in a classroom with more than one kid, right? You can
Mhm.
only help one person at a time.
Yeah.
In the ER, I
Yep.
might have 4 different people that I also have to go see, but the truth is I can only do one at a time,
Yep.
right?
One at a time. Yep.
Well, the reason that your thoughts bombard you, the reason that my thoughts bombard me is I haven't trained them to, like, I'm only doing this one at a time.
Mhm.
This one that I defined. The rest of you are going to have to wait your turn,
Yeah.
right? But you
Mhm.
can do that. So
Mhm.
we've written down the anxious thought, as raw and ugly as it
Mhm.
is, and we've written down, so we're going to use I am dumb. And
Okay.
then what is right, what is true, what is good. So
Okay.
what is right is that you're working with other kids in class you formed a study group with other kids in class to get better at it.
Mhm.
So we're just coming out of math class, right?
Yeah.
What's good is we just got our test results back and you got a B.
That's not dumb.
And what's true is the teacher just told you in class, like, hey, Keegan, I'm really excited about how well you're doing. Like, you're really getting these
Mhm.
fractions. You're doing good.
Uh-huh.
Now, the teacher's opinion is just an opinion,
Mhm.
except that she has the authority of fact because she's the expert. She's the teacher,
Mhm.
right? That's why her opinion counts.
Yeah.
And so I'm the bully. I got you cornered up on the
Mhm.
locker. I want you to shoot back at me like, no, I'm not. You can't say that. That's mean. I want you to do all that stuff. And because I
Mhm.
got answers for every one of them. And I'm going to
Uh-huh.
just beat you down because I talk
Mhm.
faster. I talk louder. I have more experience, right? All that kind of
Mhm.
stuff until you're pulling your hair out and screaming down the hallway.
Yeah.
And then I really have won. I have power now, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But instead, you came back with like, you're dumb. And you came back with, well, I'm working with other kids in class to get better.
Uh-huh.
Well, we just got our test results back and I got a B.
Mhm.
The teacher was encouraging me earlier. She said, I'm really getting the fractions down.
Mhm.
Those things are all objectively true.
Uh-huh.
I can't overcome that because I have
Okay.
opinion. My opinion is that you're dumb,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So you don't know this,
Mhm.
but the reason that my opinion is that is because I got test results back today too, and I got a D.
Mhm.
And I haven't told you yet. I mean, nobody knows because I don't want anybody to know about the
Mhm.
problems that I might be having. But the teacher
Yeah.
said, like, I got to get a tutor. So
Mhm.
I'm not doing it. You're doing really good
Yeah.
in fractions, and I'm just not getting it. Like, you're not going to
Mhm.
know that stuff because you could turn the tables on me.
Mhm.
So that's one of the reasons that bullies are bullies right in school is because I'm trying to get power over you because I'm not getting self-confidence the right way by doing the work I need to do. I'm just not getting the material, whatever, right? Problems at
Mhm.
home, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
That's how we get bullies, right? I'm trying to get power
Mhm.
over you by buffaloing you. That's
Yeah.
that's a tool that you can use to control your anxious thoughts.
Mhm.
And in the
Okay.
beginning, like you're going to suck at it
Yeah.
because your anxious thoughts are kind of like a toddler raised on an energy drink and no adult supervision,
Yeah.
not used to anybody telling them what to do.
That's very true.
And so when you show up and like, no, I'm just doing one at a time. I'm just doing this one right now, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I also tell patients about being a cell phone tower.
Oh.
So that
Okay.
connection is that, especially you Texans want to be, historically at least, you Texans want to be, I'm a rugged individualist, right?
Uh-huh.
So instead, I suggest being a cell phone tower.
Okay.
So a cell phone tower has to stand up straight in order to do what it does. If it topples over, it can't send out any signal. You won't have even one bar. It's just not going to be good, right? In order to work, a cell phone tower has to stand up straight. They're hundreds and hundreds of feet tall, but they're not very big.
Yeah.
Right? Not very big at the bottom. They're even smaller at the top. And down here at the ground where we live, it might be no wind today. It's really calm. But up there at the top, the wind never stops.
Yeah.
Right? And the wind goes every different direction. Changes. It's every different direction.
Yeah.
The reason that a cell phone tower stands up straight is because it's got these guy wires that come off of it in all different directions. Right?
Yep.
They're anchored really firmly to the ground. The cell phone tower doesn't pull on every wire all the time. It pulls on this wire. It needs this wire for support when the wind's blowing that way. It needs this wire, or it needs this wire over here. It needs different wires depending on where the wind is blowing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't pull on every wire all the time. Right? Is that making sense so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got a patient whose name is not really Sally, but we're going to call her that. And so she came into our unit like lots of people, right? I'm anxious or I'm depressed and I'm suicidal. Like not everybody was suicidal, but she was. And she had a defined plan. She hadn't done her plan yet, but she had a defined plan. I came to work in the morning. She had come in overnight. I came to work in the morning, and our first interaction together was conflict. That's how we started.
Oh, man.
She said, "Can I take my tray back to my room, eat breakfast in a room?" And I said, "No, we like everybody to eat out here, in the main room with everybody." That was the conflict, because she wanted to eat in her room. She finally gave in and ate in the dining room with everybody else. And I'm like, okay, well, that's how this is going to go, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then I led nurses groups. And I am a nurse coach, so I turned, like a lot of my colleagues would turn on a TED Talk. The TED Talks are probably, a lot of them probably really good, except you can disconnect in a TED Talk, right? Like you watch a movie at home while also playing on your phone. So you don't not really get in the movie. So I didn't do that. I turned every one of those nurse groups into a coaching conversation, into group coaching. I also think that the wisdom is in the room. So if you've been dealing with depression for some years, and I show up and I've been dealing with depression too, you probably have insight, even if you're a patient, right? I believe that patients have value. I believe that every person has value.
Yes, sir.
I don't care who
Very
you
much
are,
so.
where you're from, what your story is. I believe that every person has value. And that means that, so I'm telling part of my story in this group, right? Well, a lot of them want to sit back and the nurse or the therapist or whoever it is, like they have the answer because they're the expert. That's top down.
Yeah.
Right? Well, if you're like, I personally have not gone to therapy, but I have my own reasons for that. But so I'm not going to discount that. I'm not going to knock it. A lot of people do, and there's a lot of value in it for those people. I've just chosen a different direction.
Yeah.
So not to be negative about it, I've just chosen a different direction. So, but now I lost my train of thought. Well, anyway, so instead of being top down, I think that if you've been, so by the time somebody gets to that unit's closed now, but by the time somebody gets to that unit, they've already been in therapy, and maybe different therapists, and maybe different kinds of therapy, right? So you know way more about therapy than I do, having experienced it, right? So you probably have insight into the thing that I'm, like my story. In fact, insight that the nurse who just happens to work there because this was an opening and I got the job there, right? You probably have insight that I don't have. I think that the wisdom is in the room.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And another reason that I did that is I didn't just run around and tell people like, well, the wisdom is in the room here. Okay. You guys bring out the wisdom. I didn't do that. But the patients, the clients got the idea like, hey, I do have value here. because they were able to say something that was beneficial to the other person.
Yeah.
They were able to add value into the room as opposed to just be there like waiting for somebody to tell them.
Yeah.
Right? It worked out really good. Anyway,
That's
so
awesome.
this girl's in this room, Sally, right, is in this group, and she is not paying attention. She's not participating in the conversation. And I talked about cell phone towers. So that evening, I happened to be her nurse, so I had to spend some one-on-one time with her and do my assessment and whatever. And then she had some questions about it, about cell phone towers. They're like, oh, good, maybe you were listening. Like, yeah. I didn't say that. I gotta play it cool because I don't want her to like go the other way, right? But she was listening. Well, I come back to work the next day, so this is the second day. She did participate in a nursing group, and brought up some questions from the previous day. She had been listening. Didn't seem like it, but she had.
Yeah.
The third morning when I come to work, she said, "I have a plan." Now, I'm in a unit where a lot of people are suicidal, so I have a plan might mean a different thing.
Yeah, not like, good.
Okay, well, tell me about your plan. And so she had developed a plan talking about, she brought up cell phone tower. She had had a conversation the night before with her husband about some things that they had been, some things between them that they had been just avoiding, right, for some time. And then when you avoid things, they just fester. In healthcare, we call that an infection. If it festers long enough, it becomes septic.
Yep.
Right? And that's an infection that's really worse, and now it affects way more things than just the original problem. Right? And that's what happens in our minds when we just let things fester. It becomes an infection, then it begins to spread and affect way more things. You get septic with your thoughts. So, she cleared some things up with her husband that night. And talked to several of her friends and had developed guy wires.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So her plan included, I'm going to go home. I'm going to call this person. She had talked with these different people and gotten like, I'm going to call you on Tuesday. I'm going to call you on Thursday, like all this kind of thing. Right. And just a real short conversation, just a few minutes, touching base with each other.
Okay.
Do you need to lean on me? Right. People that she knew that she chose.
Yeah.
She said, I'm not going to take any medicine. I'm not telling people don't take medicine. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what Sally's plan was. Right? So I'm like, well, have you told anybody? No, nobody else is here. So you're the first one. Like, okay. Would you like some help talking to the other people that she needed to talk to some other people to get clearance to go, like the doctor, the therapist, and so on, right? Or social worker, to be able to get cleared to be released. So would you like some help framing that conversation? Because in a hospital, like what we do is we give people medicine. Like that's what healthcare is.
Yeah.
Right? So if you don't want to take the medicine, then like maybe we should talk about, I'm a type 2 diabetic and I don't take medicine. It doesn't mean that I just ignore it. Right? If I'm not going to take medicine, then that means specifically that I have to do other things. But otherwise, it's just ignoring the problem and pretending that it doesn't exist. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So we talked about her plan, and we talked about how to frame her plan when she had those other conversations. We had an average length of stay in that unit of 5 to 7 days, and she was out in 2.5. As soon as she could get her husband to come and pick her up on the third day, she was out. So she was there for 1 overnight and 2.5 days.
Oh, wow.
With a plan.
That's awesome.
Because she thought about cell phone towers and how can I apply that in my own life? Like, who can I lean on in my own life? Right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So for some people, it might be their doctor, might be their medication management person, right? Psychiatrist, might be their therapist, might be, spouse, sibling, good friend, like whatever. But it should be several people, not just one.
Yes.
Because one can't support you in all different things. That's one reason. But the other reason is, like, I'm just going to lean on you all the time. I'm going to wear you out.
Yeah.
Right? So a cell phone tower, hundreds of feet tall, The wind never stops. It always has stress up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's always being whipped around. The reason they can stand up straight is because they have those guy wires that support them.
Yeah.
And they just pull on that wire as it needs to, spreads the load around all the wires that support it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a great way to build a support system, is to have that central goal. Not just, hey, I need help here and there, but to have a specific goal in mind, to like keeping the cell phone tower standing straight up. So, but we have actually reached the end of the episode.
Okay.
So Steve, we do like to try to get people back on for a second go round. So you're more than welcome back on the show if you're able and willing.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. But do you got any shout outs to any of your social medias or anything you want to do or anything like that? October is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so the suicide hotline is 988.
Yep.
If you did not know, I'm advocate for that. So as you can tell by the little numbers on the poster back there. But yeah, if you got any shout outs you want to do right quick, go ahead and shoot them out.
My email is steve@maximpact.com. MAXIMPACT.com. And my website is maximpact.com.
Awesome. So if anyone needs help or anything, just reach on out to you.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll either help you or I'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Sweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. That is very kind of you and very just awesome of you. Not many people are willing to do that, so I got to thank you for that.
Yeah.
But until we see each other again next time, I hope you have a wonderful night. And to the audience, thank you for checking us out at WDJY FM. And y'all have a wonderful evening and good night.
Thanks for having me.